You are watching the New American Media. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Unhappy Hour here on the newamericanmedia.com. I am your host. My name is Brian Engelman. I want to remind you that if you're not following us on Twitter, we're at American_media_. Check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/thenewamericanmedia. Check out our homepage, thenewamericanmedia.com. Right there, right off the bat, you're going to see a cool interview that we just did with the Libertarian presidential candidate for this United States election, Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Check that out. Leave your comments below. Thanks for sticking around. This is our sports show. I want to thank Brandon Odell for joining us on Strictly Browns. Always appreciate that. He's predicting a 20-10 victory from the Cleveland Browns over the defending Super Bowl champion New York Football Giants. They're New York Football Giants. I just love that phrase. The New York Football Giants. It's just thinking of those 60s and those NFL films. They're so great. Now, and don't forget, the Cleveland Browns used to be a fantastic franchise in the 50s and 60s with Automatic, Otto Graham, and Jim Brown. But it's been since 1964 since Cleveland anything has won anything. And that's why the show's called The Unhappy Hour, because in most cities you can talk about the good times. But as Cleveland fans, you don't really have the opportunity because you don't remember any of the good times. And that gets a little frustrating. So we're going to welcome in another huge Cleveland sports fan, Zak Baris, to the program. He's a regular contributor and co-host from time to time. Maybe.
Hello?
Zak, it's Brian. You are live on the Unhappy Hour. It's been too long. How have you been, sir?
I've been good. How about yourself?
I'm living the dream as usual. What's the status of you and your life? We had mentioned that you are a regular contributor and occasional co-host, especially during NBA time, during the playoffs and the draft, to be specific. But we have been disconnected. We've been on a little bit of a summer break, a hiatus. What's new in your life, sir?
I recently just started my new job. I cannot say what team it's with at the current moment, but I'm now working as a West Coast scout for an NBA team. Living in LA still, but working for a team currently back east.
Ah, very good.
So I started last week, so I had to fly back east when I was already out in LA again. I was back in Cleveland for 10 days, and then that was just my new city. So everything's been going really well, though.
Well, don't tell us who you're working for, and obviously you didn't, but tell us how your job responsibilities changed, because I already introduced you as a lifelong Cleveland sports fan and NBA scout. Remind people, what were you doing before? By the way, if you want to follow Zak, he's on Twitter at @ZBaris, that's ZBARIS. So what were you doing before, and where are you at now as far as job responsibilities day to day?
I used to scout high school players and help place them, basically on AU teams for certain rosters, in Nike and Adidas camps, the Under Armour camps. I used to basically place all these kids and help them, basically help them with their college choice, define what fits are the best for them, and basically can help them basically progress to the level they need to be able to be drafted into the NBA. So that's basically what I did before. Right now, I'm scouting for an NBA team, basically the Pac-12 and a couple other conferences out west. And, and when other schools play out here, whenever there's tournaments out here, like in Las Vegas or so. So my job basically is now to scout players that I'm assigned to watch and teams I'm assigned to watch, evaluate the players, type up the reports, and then, and then we go from there.
So you're a part of the machine. You're a cog in this whole machine. We've had a few months to kind of sit back on it. You are a lifelong Cleveland sports fan.
The Browns game against the Bills a week and a half ago. It hailed.
Yeah, I had a buddy that was at that game as well. How miserable was that? We can talk about NBA in a minute, but how miserable was that
I can
experience?
tell you, it was the first September game I've ever left early. I mean, it's not like I left at halftime. I left with 5.5 minutes. I left with 5 minutes left to go right after Shurmur punted. When we were down by 10 points at the 50-yard line, and I look at my friend, we're at the game, and I just go, you know what? I can't take this anymore. We're not going to win. This is over. Let's go.
Yeah, 0-4. Same old story. Same old story.
Yeah, the Cleveland Clowns.
The Cleveland Clowns. Yeah, my buddy Brandon, he's our co-host with Strictly Browns, the segment we do during the NFL season, and he was at that game. His dad has season tickets, so he goes to maybe 2 or 3 games a year. And, I mean, I was watching it out here in Los Angeles, and it looked miserable. It looked cold. It looked wet. The fans, when they did the shot of the fans in the stadium, they looked as miserable as I felt watching it out here on a flat-screen TV in Los Angeles. It just, I don't know. I'm seeing a few signs of life out of the Browns. I'm seeing a little bit of progression out of Weeden and Richardson. What do you think as far as the trajectory of this team?
I think Weeding's definitely gotten better. I'll say that. The offensive line, Trent Richardson, I'm glad they're not giving him the ball 25 times a game right now because they're not going to win. That's the thing is there's no reason to overuse the guy when you're 0-4. You're not going to the playoffs. That's just my opinion. But personally, I love Trent Richardson. I don't think they're getting any blocking out of Sean Laveau, and I think Mitchell Schwartz has been pretty bad too. Pass blocking, he's been a bad pass blocker, and he hasn't been great in the run blocking game either. They're not opening a lot of holes for him. Joe Thomas, I have to say, has been pretty mediocre. He's not looking like the Joe Thomas of old. I'll say that. Alex Mack looks fine, and Jason Pinkston looks good. But, the O-line isn't the strength like everybody thought it would be. And I think that's a concern, And that's why, Richardson's only averaging over, 3.5 yards a carry. I mean, he's fighting for every single one of those yards. His legs don't stop moving. I think he's been a fantastic addition for the Browns. I think the major concern right now is with the wide receiving corps. I think there are issues all over that side of the ball. They drop tons of passes. I think Weeden actually, during the Baltimore game, if those receivers would have caught the ball, they would have won the game.
Oh, yeah. They dropped quite a few.
Jordan Norwood had a bunch of drops. Greg Little had a bunch of drops. I mean, it was just frustrating because every time you're just like, oh, you see the potential in the team. The defense, even without Joe Hayden, was playing well, and Phil Taylor. I remember you tweeted a few weeks ago, you said, wait till this defense has Joe Hayden and Phil Taylor back. I go, too bad they're going to be 0-6 by then.
You did reply. Yeah, you did. You said that exactly.
And I still remember that comment. I was telling someone last week, I was like, because they said the same thing, and I was like, listen, it doesn't matter. They're going to be 0-6 even with an elite defense. Honestly, I don't think they need that many personnel changes player-wise. I think this team, and some people call me crazy, but they're an elite wide receiver. I'm not talking about Roddy White. I'm not talking about I'm talking about a very good wide receiver, not truly elite. They're a very good wide receiver and maybe 1 or 2 offensive linemen away from becoming a really, really good football team. They are so close. And a coach, too. Pat Shurmur don't even get me started with him.
Well, I think this could be an 8-8 team. People will call me crazy.
I think easily. If the receivers could catch the football, they'd be a 10-6 team. I mean, you'd have a win against Philly right now. You probably would have beaten Cincy.
Well, how about if the defensive backs? How about if the defensive backs could pick that one off against Vic? You beat the Eagles.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, this team should easily be 2-2, if not 3-1, but they're not. They're 0-4 for a reason. It's Shurmur looks lost out there. He doesn't know what he's doing. The offense has absolutely no amount of creativity whatsoever. When you watch them, it's just like what's coming. I was sitting there at the Bills game looking with my friend, and I go, okay, it's going to be a run off the tackle on 1st and 10. What do? They run off the tackle. 2nd down, it's going to be a short pass up the middle for 6 yards. What do you know? It's a short. They just have the receiver running in the flat. And then he gets clocked. And then we have a 3rd and 4 situation. Again, a pass is coming because Shurmur's not going to run the ball on 3rd and 4. So their offense is very predictable. There are no trick plays coming. I've never seen them. I haven't seen Shurmur run one trick play. No fake punts. No fake field goals. And it's just like what's coming. It's like a 7th grade offense. You know exactly every play that's coming out there, and it's not hard to predict.
Well, speaking of predictions, on Strictly Browns, we had 2 predictions that are saying the Browns are going to beat the Giants, and we referenced all of the upsets of years past with lousy Browns teams rising to the occasion, whether it's the Saints, whether it's the Patriots. We had a 20-10 prediction from Brandon. I'm picking 27-24 Browns. What are you thinking?
I'm just going to say here's the difference. Under Mancini, they were able to surprise some teams. They beat some good teams. Under Pat Shurmur, every game we've been supposed to lose, they've lost. They haven't had one upset now in a year and a half. If Shurmur's the coach. When they went 4-12, look who they beat. They beat the Colts, the Jaguars, the Seahawks, and one other bad football team last year. And I think maybe the Dolphins or something. I don't even know.
Yeah, it was the Dolphins.
And they went out there. They weren't even close against the good team. I mean, they were close, but you knew they weren't going to win it. We were just out coached. With everything. Every year they seem to always beat the Super Bowl winner every year. But I just cannot see the Browns beating the Giants in New York. Even though New York seems to be terrible at home, I'm still going to say New York is probably going to be 28-10.
Oh, so no offense again.
I hope I'm wrong. No, I'm not predicting an upset.
No offense again from the Browns because they've been putting points up against Cincinnati. They were,
Cincinnati, they always score points against Cincinnati. When Brady Quinn was the quarterback, they're putting up points against Cincinnati.
Now we're talking Ocho Cinco and Brady Quinn. Yeah, and that's interesting because you think back, it's like, well, they play this team usually this way, but there's so much turnover on teams. It's not really the same team that you're getting, but there is something to when you start finding patterns developing. Pittsburgh generally does well against Cleveland no matter who's in there. There aren't many upsets. There's an occasional one, but it's just been a bad decade and a half. But yeah, it's been rough so far, but I really like what I'm seeing out of Trent Richardson. I think he's the real deal.
I do. I love Trent Richardson. I think he's been big. I think Josh Gordon's going to be. I think he's going to be a good receiver too. He made a couple of nice plays. He's not getting a ton of playing time. But when he does, he showed up. I do like Josh Gordon a lot. I think he can be very good for the Browns.
Well, what
I just don't know right now. I mean, looking at it, I don't think the front office would have ever wasted a second-round pick on Josh Gordon, knowing it was going to be the first overall pick in the second round. I think they were expecting to have a big year.
This year, expecting him to get in and have a big year.
Yeah, I think the Browns in general are expecting to be an 8 or 9 or 9-7 football team. I think they looked upon it in the offseason and go, listen, Colt McCoy can't be as bad as Brandon Weeden can't be as bad as Colt McCoy. We had Trent Richardson. We didn't have a running game last year. The receiving core has to be better. Greg Little progressed. Massaquoi obviously progressed, but he's injured. Josh Gordon will be a welcome addition. Mitchell Schwartz will be a welcome addition to this football team. And we're going back and, we added a little bit to the defense too. This should be a really good football team. I think the Browns front office, when they're expecting to win 8 to 9 football games this season, I don't think they predicted this.
They still could win 8 or 9, but it would take quite a run.
No, they can't. They cannot win 8 or 9 football games.
I'm not putting money on it. I'm just saying. I'm the eternal optimist when it comes to my Browns.
And I have them at 2 wins at this point. I mean, it just depends. I think Jimmy Haslam was on Fox Business yesterday. He said, he's not going to make a lot of changes when he takes office. They're going to wait to evaluate. I can tell you right now, if this team's 0-6 or 0-7 when he takes control of this football team in a couple of weeks, something tells me Shurmur will not be the coach if they're 0-6 or 0-7. He's not going to put up with it for that much longer.
And not even just ride out the rest of this year, just instantly make a change somewhere else. Exactly.
And, I would just, you have 2 former head coaches on the staff. You have Dick Jerome and you have Brad Childress. Give it to one of them. See what they can do.
That's a good point.
Pat Shurmur sure isn't getting it done.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to is results. You don't want to hear a nice talk. You don't want to be hopeful and have good ideas and good vibes. You need wins. I don't care that we were 1 play away from beating the Ravens, 1 play away from beating the Eagles. You got to knock those birds out of the sky and get the W.
Here's the thing. Jerome has head coaching experience. He won. Don't forget, he was the NFL Coach of the Year in 2001 when they went 13-3 with the Bears. I don't know if you remember that game against the Browns when the Browns, managed to be up by 2 touchdowns with a minute left and they lost.
Was that the one with all those interceptions? Who was that defensive back? Was that Mike? Who am I thinking of? Mike Adams?
Mike Brown.
Mike Brown, yeah.
And David Terrell with the catch, the onside kick. I mean, it was just, that game was shocking. And then they lost in overtime. And that was just Cleveland Browns football for you. But Jerome won head coach of the year that year. He went 13-3 with the Bears. And Brad Childress was, 1 bad Brett Favre pass away from going to the Super Bowl.
So we're stocked inside of the Browns organization right now with head coaches
I think,
who wouldn't
I'm
mind
not
a
saying
shot.
they're great coaches, but they're better coaches than Pat Shurmur. I don't think Pat Shurmur could ever take a team 13-3.
So how did he do? How did he do decent down in St. Louis then with the Rams?
He didn't. Their offense was ranked 30th in the league.
With
And
Bradford?
they hired him yeah, go look. They were ranked 30th in the league or 31st in the league, their offense. He was just touted, he was credited with basically saying Sam Bradford had a great year because the Rams went 7-9.
All right.
Both made the playoffs at 7-9.
But I'll tell you, let me get your reaction then on our, well, I can't say our young quarterback, but our new quarterback who's old.
Our middle-aged quarterback.
Yeah, our middle-aged quarterback. What are your thoughts on Weeden? I'll give you mine in a second, but I want to get yours.
I think he's got an unbelievable arm. I just don't think the Browns are taking advantage of what he does well. They're throwing a lot of deep fade routes, and he does not complete the deep fades. I don't think he's really completed any this season, maybe one or two. He throws a great ball down the middle of the field because he throws strikes. And that's what the Browns need to focus on. Whether they can get the ball 15 to 20 yards, spread the ball down the field, just in the middle of the field. He tends to find receivers open over there, but he does not do well finding receivers on the fade. He overthrows it. He throws it out of bounds. He misses a lot of open throws.
Well, and he threw the Hail Mary out of the end zone against the Ravens. Didn't even give him a chance.
And that was frustrating too. And it's just like, but I think they just need to take advantage of his strengths. I think they're doing too much. I think Shurmur's trying to push him too hard on those deep fadeaways because you're not going to, it's such a low percentage of completing those passes, especially when you have receivers that don't catch the ball well, like Greg Little and Jordan Norwood and those guys. And you have a quarterback that doesn't throw a great fade. He's really, he's got a cannon for an arm. He throws the ball fantastic. He throws the ball. He does well on screen passes. And he throws the slant unbelievably well, and he throws the ball over the middle really well too. And you have to take advantage of that because those are the only things our receivers seem to catch are slants and catching the ball right up the middle of the field. That's it. And that's where he needs to take, and that's where the play calling they need to take advantage of that.
So as far as, yeah, I mean, I agree that I think he is a rocket for an arm. I don't think it. I know it. I'm just observing it and reporting it. What I think has nothing to do with the fact that this guy was drafted
the guy's throwing lasers. He's throwing as hard as Brett Favre. I mean,
John Elway, Brett Favre. He looks like a guy that played for the Yankees who could sling it. He looks the part, but that means your window of opportunity with a 29-year-old quarterback, it's now. Like you're saying, the front office thought that they'd be a much better team at this point. Their window of opportunity begins now.
The biggest question with the Browns is if Brandon Weeden looks decent and the Browns finish the year up 3-13, let's say, because that's their 2-14, and they wind up with the number one overall pick. This is what you have to look at now. But Weeden looked good. He finishes the season well. He looks good. His QB ratings in the low 80s or something. Throws for 3,600 yards, 3,700 yards. Well, the question is, do you feel Weeden's your future, or do you go and draft Geno Smith from West Virginia, who could be the next RG3? I'm not saying he's as good as RG3, but he certainly looks good. Wait till he faces some bigger, better defenses, but he certainly looks like he's the dark horse for the number one pick at this point. Or is there a team desperate enough like the Redskins that's willing to give up 3 first-rounders and 3 second-rounders to go get him? I almost feel that's the answer, but do you really feel you can pass up on the next great quarterback if if it's going to be him?
That's an interesting question. Do you get somebody young? I mean, the Broncos used a pretty high draft pick this year to get a quarterback coming in as Peyton Manning's coming in because one's old and one is more of the future type quarterback. But yeah, I mean, what would you do if you were GM? Would you trade down and get 3 first-round picks?
I think it all depends. The Browns don't have a ton of holes. They really don't have a ton of holes. But it allows you to build. But the problem is if you give up on the next great, Hall of Fame quarterback, you're going to be ridiculed forever for making that decision. Or if you go and take Geno Smith and he's good, you go, okay, well, he doesn't have any weapons around him. How are you going to surround him with talent? This allows you, if you pick up, 3 extra, if you can pick up a couple extra first rounders and a couple extra seconds, you're suddenly in place, look at the Rams have for the next couple of years. They're going to be able to stockpile so many players and bring in so much talent. It allows them to, become a better football team, not overnight, but a lot faster than they would have,
Right.
And especially for a team that, for a front office that doesn't believe in free agency like the Cleveland Browns, maybe that's the route you have to go. It'll be hard justifying taking a quarterback 2 years in a row in the NFL draft, in the first round.
But the only way it might make sense is if there's a new head coach, if there's a new general manager, if there's a new owner, and they say, look, we like Brandon Weeden. We've seen a lot of good things. Our philosophy is to get a young quarterback who's 20, 21 years old, and we want to have someone a decade younger than the guy that we have now. But Brandon Weeden's good, and we're going to roll with him for a minute and let them both compete for the spot.
Even at that point, what you can still do is I'm not a fan of rushing rookies straight into starting right at the beginning of the season. I don't think it always works out well. If Weeden, like I said, if you choose to take a guy like Geno Smith, the Browns likely will have the number 1 overall pick. You can go and, take Geno Smith, sit him on the bench, let him learn for a little bit, and if Weeden happens to be really good, it allows you to trade Geno Smith. You have leverage or go and trade Brandon Weeden,
Right.
In the offseason. It allows you to do one or the other, and that's why I'm almost for taking Geno Smith. But like I said, it's hard to pass up on some of those guys. There's not any complete elite talent like last year. There are no Trent Richardsons or A.J. Greens or Calvin Johnsons in this draft. There are not. There are talented players, but not like in years past. There are no game breakers like last year or the year before. Geno Smith is about it. Matt Barkley is a good quarterback, but I wouldn't be willing to take him number 1 overall. I'm not that big of a fan.
Well,
he reminds me a lot of Leonard and Sanchez. So, and I
that's
just
not
don't
working
know
out
if
so
that
well.
would be a good fit.
Yeah, that's not
like I
going
said,
so well.
Barkley's a great college quarterback, but he has all day in the pocket to throw. So does Geno Smith, but Barkley has all day to throw. He has some of the most talented receivers in the NCAA. He's got Robert Woods. He's got a really talented team down there. So it's really hard to tell whether you would take Barkley. But like I said, I think Geno Smith is the far front runner at this point. And the Browns will have a decision to make if they do have the number 1 overall pick, because Smith will go number 1, most likely at this point, unless he finishes the year horribly.
Well, then what about let's expand this out. Let's make the official transition from the NFL. Let's talk about the NCAA for a second here. We're talking with Zak Baris. Let's pause for a brief station identification here on the TNAM radio network.
Follow the newamericanmedia.com on Twitter at American_media_.